Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Ben Wightwick, how are you this morning, my time, this afternoon, your time?
I'm very good, sir. Very good, sir. You good? You keeping well?
I'm doing great, man. How are things over on the Isle of Wight?
Yeah, looking out the window, it's a bit grey, but it's a Thursday. I don't mind Thursdays.
Thursdays are better than Mondays.
It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I feel like you're a man who needs very little introduction in the legal tech space because you've been here back all the way from when I had hair. So that's been a while.
That's been a while. And I was probably a little bit darker as well. That's the way it is. I've just retained the hair. That's all.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm losing the color too, but it's all good. So you're currently at Autologics. You spent some time at HiQ. I thought this was a really good conversation for us to have. So by the time this airs, we will have launched our Extranet product, which will happen April 22nd, I think is the date we're targeting now. It's already kind of underway, but you've got a long history in the legal extranet space, and I want to tap into some of that perspective. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody, what you're up to these days? As I like to say, who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
So Ben Wightwick, I work at Autologics, which is a workflow and process orchestration platform. We have clients on the law firm side, we've got clients on the corporate legal side, we've got financial services clients, and basically everyone's just trying to digitize and automate processes, not just individual workflows, but gnarly kind of complex processes as we sort of exist in this legal world where complex is normal. I've been around the block, spent 10 years working for a law firm, 10 years working for HiQ, 3.5 almost years working here. I have some battle scars. So, yeah.
Don't we all? Well, good stuff. So as I mentioned in my opening statement here, the purpose of this conversation is I want to talk extranet. And, from my perspective, there has been, and I've been in this game for a while too, not as long as you, but we started our journey in 2008 when we were AcroWire, and we built essentially bespoke solutions. We fell down the legal rabbit hole very early, and our capabilities on the Microsoft stack aligned really well to what law firms wanted to do with their intranet and extranet platform. So we built a lot of bespoke extranet solutions for firms. And we decided to productize actually many years ago. 2018 is when we started. We took a few wrong turns along the way. Microsoft completely changed their development model after we were hundreds and maybe even 1,000 hours into our development. They went from their old Angular development model to React and SPFX. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and made this a cloud-only product, which was a little risky at the time because at that time, Big Law was not in the cloud for the most part. Our timing was good. We launched in 2022, and law firms Big Law started to move in earnest to the cloud. And we're taking a different approach with Extranet than I think has been taken previously. The incumbents in that space have a very ring fence hosted solution, really hard to get data in and out. The law firm doesn't control the environment in which the platform is hosted. Integrations are a challenge. I wanted to kind of just get a little bit of background from historically, in your years at HiQ, you and I have talked about there were different levels of, I don't know if maturity is the right word, but the way in which firms would use the capabilities that HiQ offered. And I think you kind of broke them down into segments. Like, tell me a little bit about how you thought about it then.
I mean, it's sort of it's one of those things. We called it, or I called it, and I don't know if anyone else did, but I called it a maturity complex, because you think of an extranet sort of back in the day was, I need to share some files with 2, 3 different sort of external parties. How do I do that securely? How do I do that on any device? How do I do that in a way that is controlled and ring fenced? And there wasn't a lot out there at the time that was providing that kind of experience. Certainly from I mean, you talked about Microsoft, but certainly Microsoft wasn't easy to facilitate that. It just was difficult, really challenging. And some of the DMS providers had sort of services, but it wasn't really nice as a platform. Couldn't scale it. Was really, again, challenging to sort of integrate into the third parties. So back in the day, it was okay. Well, that's the starting point. The starting point for an extranet was, okay, I want to share some files. Then you'd start to think about, okay, well, what are the other use cases that this technology allowed you to facilitate and leverage? What more value can we give to our customers? What does that look like? And then you start thinking about, okay, well, then you'd start, okay, well, we're going to share some, it might be some information with matter or client specific. But then you start thinking about, okay, well, transactionally, what can we deliver transactionally? I mean, everything's document centric around sort of law firm space, and naturally an extension of sharing documents is, okay, well, we need to facilitate the data room, deal room kind of environment. So we need to, that's the most basic sort of sharing and exposure. Back in the day, it used to be, right, law firm X had a room on their client floor which was filled with documents and files, and somebody would come in and they'd start rifling through and having a look and trying to get deal information and try and pick it out. That was the old deal room, data room kind of scenario. Digitizing that was just a natural extension of that sort of simple file sharing, secure kind of environment. And all of the processes that went around that. So starting to think about, okay, well, typically buyers of things would have questions to ask, and how do you provision that? What does that look like? And so you can start to see how sort of the capabilities needed to map against the real world analog way of doing that process. And then over time, those kind of capabilities, the ability to manage sort of extra metadata, individual data points, and start to think about, I mean, how do you, what can that do on top of that? What more information can we share? How do we share more billing information as opposed to the invoice? How do we share live data? What does that look like? And then that's the kind of maturity scale. It was always that kind of extranet, simple transactional kind of world, then maybe client and matter views, and then what I would call like maturity level 4, which was the highest, because I can't count beyond 4. So I quite kept it nice and simple. But it was 4 is where you're building bespoke solutions, oftentimes productizing solutions and making it subscription. So revenue generating, or some kind of unique type of process, transaction, or really complex sort of legal use case. And so extranets for me, you know, it's a one word, 2-syllable sort of thing, but actually means so much more than that in the legal space. You know what I mean? So extranet is sort of, it means so many different things, but ultimately it's about getting work done. And the type of work that you do with the technology isn't bound by the sort of the capabilities. I mean, we often talked about, and I still talk about it now with Autologics, but you talk about the idea that you've got a bunch of tools and a bunch of capabilities, and imagine those capabilities as Lego bricks. You can, with the same collection of Lego bricks, you can build a speedboat, you can build a car, you can build a helicopter. They're all 3 types of vehicle, so they have something in common. Equate that to legal processes, legal transactions, legal whatever, but they're 3 very different modes of transport. So they've got 3 different outcomes. They've got 3 different ways of manipulating, moving, doing whatever. That's what kind of sort of flexibility that those kind of capabilities that now modern day SharePoint capabilities and all the other stuff, the tools that are out there, they all offer out the box, or capabilities that sort of you can build out. So that's the maturity world that I sort of often talk about. It's sort of the basic, simple. I need to share 1 or 1,000 documents with 1 or 100 third-party people outside of my organization. I need to do it securely, simply, on any device, 24/7, which is what cloud gives you, all that sort of stuff. And then all the way through to sort of, can we use the same tools to create products and services, create value, create revenue, create profitability, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and Microsoft has made things easier with SharePoint Online and Teams, but there are still fundamental challenges, which is why we exist, right? It's integrating with the back office systems is still almost impossible without writing custom code that law firms don't want to write and maintain. Some think they do, and they really look at, oh, well, we can build this in 300 hours. Why license a tool to do that? And what they neglect to understand is the ongoing maintenance and support that's required to maintain those integrations, because APIs change, new features get released, Microsoft changes things and they break, and somebody has to go in and fix that. And so we play in the space where, in that white space between the capabilities that SharePoint offers out of the box and what law firms want. And it's a fairly wide gap. And I don't anticipating it getting closed dramatically, because, another area where we put significant R&D is around governance and provisioning. So the governance tools, Purview, if you've tried to use Purview, it's a kludge, man. It's that's Microsoft's, data management, information rights management platform. It's really difficult to use, and law firms need something easy. Provisioning, right? How do you stand up new sites? Do you want to stand them up automatically? Anytime a new matter is provisioned in a particular practice, do you want to stand up an extranet site and add the billing attorneys and the PMS? Can't do that with Microsoft out of the box. We kind of play in that white space. But how have you seen extranets impact the business, either in terms of like client retention or reduction in administration overhead? Like how historically, how have extranets moved the dial in those areas?
I think it's a funny one, because it ultimately depends on that scale of maturity that I was talking about earlier. The reality is, if you're simply providing another means for somebody to get access to the information that they can ask you over email or whatever, like the simple file sharing, bit of knowledge sharing, various other bits and pieces, that is sort of important and perceived to be important. And some clients, I remember back in the day, they sort of delivered a client portal to every single one of their clients, like over 2,000 clients, and they had them, and they were dynamically refreshing with quite personalized content for the individual, personalized content for the client, and then generic content that they would be servicing to everyone based on sort of taxonomies and structures and various other bits and pieces. And I think you start to think about whether they've moved the dial. And oftentimes it would be, okay, well, what does that mean? And so for me, how's it moved the dial? Has it generated revenue? Has it retained clients in some meaningful way? So have you provided a service that has left them sort of needing to come back to you, as opposed to just looking at the work that you're doing for them? Giving them access to some information is sort of step one of that process. And I look at customers of HiQ back in the day who were successfully generating subscription ARR revenue off our technology. And they were doing that through sort of building out knowledge products ultimately, and turning sort of lawyer expertise, lawyer knowledge into a commoditized solution service. Typically, the kind of world where it would be like, imagine a topic, AI governance or AI, it doesn't exist yet, AI regulation across the states of America. Okay, there's a different sort of set of rules in every single state. What does that mean? My company operates in 10 states. I want to know the status of the regulation in those 10 states. Somebody would subscribe to that because that's meaningful, it's experience, and it's clever. And I don't want to have to pay for the 6-minute increments of somebody looking that up and telling me. So, that's the kind of service that sort of meant something, was meaningful. It did change the dial. I think if you look at sort of how the delivery of legal work took place, where there was a need to collaborate across multiple jurisdictions or multiple third parties, so the client, their advisors, plus the law firm, how did that get facilitated? What did that do? Did that make that transaction 10% more efficient, 10% more productive? Very hard to weigh that up in terms of ROI, but it certainly does make a difference because you're then not relying on email and losing things and stuff like that. It's all condensed in the same sort of space. And particularly if you do that type of work regularly, which means that you can templatize that and sort of turn that through, instead of, you were talking about provisioning and everything else, if you can create a template of an M&A transaction that involves 5 different jurisdictions, because you're going to do 20 of them in the next 24 months, and the data is broadly going to be the same, and the document structure is going to be the same, et cetera, et cetera. How do you do that better, quicker, faster? That does make a difference. It does make a difference. So I think they're the kind of scenarios where I naturally think that these kind of tools, these kind of toolings sort of elevate the client service, the client delivery, because ultimately that's what it's about. Is can it be done quicker and faster? Sometimes not necessarily cheaper, but quicker and faster. Can it be done more effectively? What does that look like? Is the client happier? And has the client had a good experience? Or can the client self-service some of that stuff? What does that mean for that client? Some of these things they're not going to be a line item on a bill, but they're a feeling. They go, actually, when I worked with law firm ABC, it was frictionless. It was easy. I got what I needed when I needed it. I didn't have to wait for a day. I didn't have to wait. That is meaningful, but it's hard to put that into a box.
Spreadsheet. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is. And we run into the same challenge on the intranet side. We talk a lot about the toggling tax, which Harvard Business Review did a study, I don't know, sometime post-COVID, where they looked at information workers, and a lot of them, and measured how much time they take. Well, first of all, how many times they switch applications in a day, and it's in the thousands a day, thousands of times. And then they measured the amount of time it takes them to reorient themselves after toggling, and it added up to 4 hours a week, which is 9% of a 40-hour work week. And we all know lawyers work more than 40 hours. So that 9% becomes even more meaningful. So we talk a lot about that, but if you want to put that into a spreadsheet, you can, but it's really hard to kind of do a baseline analysis and then say, okay, how many times are you toggling after, and our special sauce is we kind of bring all of the, we call Infodash, we're like DoorDash for your data. DoorDash hasn't sent us a cease and desist on that yet, but maybe they will. Maybe they will after this podcast. Who knows? But we bring the data to you from all the back office systems. So we integrate with the practice management system, the document management system, the HRIS, experience management, CRM, you name it, we integrate with it, and we allow you to build composed views of, like a matter page often has sometimes 8, 9, 10 different data sources on it. You'll see dockets from LexisNexis. You'll see documents from iManage. You'll see the legal team and their experience from Foundation. You'll see the client team from CRM. It just goes on. And having a single pane of glass to pull all that together is a productivity booster.
Yeah.
Now, on the extranet scenarios, those things still apply, but have historically been out of reach from my perspective. It's really difficult. Like you have to, in the HiQ example, they're the dominant player in the space. A lot of times you push that information into iSheets and have to keep it in sync, right? That's overhead, and we have real-time integration. So we're trying to take a different angle and actually do something different. Like we deploy in the client's tenant. So that means it has real-time access to all the back office systems, and without you having to set up sync jobs, pushing documents and information into libraries.
And I think that's an interesting thing. I think, and it may have changed in terms of time and sort of my experience and understanding. Most law firms that we ever engaged with at HiQ, so I don't know, when I departed what was TR that back then, maybe 250 law firms, 300 law firms, something like that. Very, 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 very few were comfortable sharing real-time information.
Yeah.
It was always delivered through a proxy. So our connectors to those underlying systems that you were just referring to were through effectively what would a modern day data lake be, and we would then connect through and pull through on a daily feed or a weekly feed or whatever it is the client was comfortable doing. Because I think there is that sort of nervousness of, oh, well, actually, if you look at the time and billing and this is out of whack because, we've already done this much work, but we've only billed that much. So the client might be expecting a bigger bill, but we know we're going to write off 30% because that's what we do. So, and so there's that balance between real time and sort of that kind of more scheduled, controlled view of the work. As I said, that may have changed in terms of attitude and sort of experience, but as soon as you're exposing it to the client, you're adding to the risk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think that has changed. I think that law firms still have an appetite to curate what the client sees, and you still have the ability to do that even with real-time access. It's where you point them, right? So, for example, in a matter workspace in a DMS, you're not going to point that to your WIP, to documents that you're working on, right? When they reach a certain milestone, you put them into another folder that the client sees. It's or one area that law firms have historically not been comfortable with is sharing financial metrics with the clients. I think that's going to change. I really do. Big Hand did a study recently. I spoke at their virtual conference on this, where I think it was like 92% of law firms have said that clients have expressed a desire for an increase in financial transparency. Right. So it's like once somebody does this, now, we are an hourly shop too. We have a big professional services team that, like, I don't want to send my clients, like, before we have time to go through it and review it and say, you know what, this doesn't make sense. I get it. Right. I get it. But if law firms think that long term they're going to avoid sharing information, financial metrics that ultimately could be used against them, like what's my legal spend been over the last 12 months? That's really hard to answer as a law firm client right now unless you're tracking it on your side. You can ask your lawyers for it, and they'll pull an ad hoc report and send it to you very begrudgingly. But I think that we're moving to a place where, especially with AI, it's going to increase the competitive forces in the market, and firms are going to work hard to differentiate themselves. And any friction that you can reduce and any opportunities to increase transparency, I think, are going to be looked at favorably in the marketplace. And ultimately,
I think so. We've been to be honest with you, part of our sort of marketing was the ability to offer that differentiation. The ability. So back in the day when I was talking about IQ, when I was at IQ. And it was like, so how are you standing out from the crowd? What are you doing? And I remember building. It was in partnership with DLA UK, actually, building out the first connector to push financial data from ultimately it was a sort of, it wasn't it was 3E, but it was a database in between 3E and us. And that was in 2014, 15. And it was like, okay, we're going to do this, but we're going to do this really carefully curated, as you say. But as soon as they started doing it, others started doing it and everything else. And it was good for us because, that's like something else that we can sell to our existing customers. But market forces were at play then. There was customers asking DLA to do that, and we are, 10 years on, and we're still not seeing that kind of progression. I don't think it's got something to do with it, but I think it's the technical capability now that you can do it. There are business and risk reasons not to do it, not technical reasons, if that makes sense. And I think that's going to be part of the process. And I think particularly when you guys catch up with alternative fee arrangements and alternative business structures and all of that sort of stuff, where the UK is slightly ahead compared to you guys, that's when that's going to start to change, I think.
Totally. Yeah. And I don't view it as a technical limitation. So with Gen AI, I don't think that the technical aspects of Gen AI are going to move the dial on the transparency front. But what I do think is it's going to impact the industry in a way where a certain segment of work is going to get commoditized.
Oh, yeah,
and right. And then what's left for law firms, and there'll be plenty left for law firms. I'm not a doom and gloom guy. I do think it's going to really shake up the industry, and I think the AmLaw 200 is going to become maybe the AmLaw 75. There's going to be some consolidation that's going to come into play. I think law firms are going to have to rethink the foundational models of how they manage capital investment. Like today, we jokingly, I don't know if it's true in the UK, but we jokingly call big law as like a hotel for lawyers. Like you can pick up sticks and move down the street and take your book of business with you. And it's a cash basis business. So as a shareholder with voting rights, why would I vote for a capital project that has a 5-year break even when I'm retiring in 3, or I may pick up and move down the street in 2? Law firms have to figure this out, because the direction that we're heading, and that's fine when everybody's got their own little Etsy shop, like, hey, I do my bespoke work, and that's going to change, and tech-enabled legal services are going to have a big influence on market dynamics. And all of that's going to require investment, like long-term investment, people, infrastructure, technology. So law firms have to figure this out. It's that old model's not going to work if you've got to make long-term investments. There's going to have to be some adjustments there. So I think AI is going to influence that.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you. I mean, you look at, I think I wrote an article in like 2016, 2017 about the future. It was around when the ABS sort of model came out. And I was suggesting that some of the big law top 200 in the UK some will become more boutique. There'll be some consolidation. Then there'll be people that will just do a full service and they're just absorbing everything, because that's worked for them. But that idea that 25%, 30%, 40%, I'm making these numbers up because I'm not clever enough to sort of read a book or understand sort of the latest trends. There is going to be a chunk of work that somebody can do without a lawyer, because the services are available, the technology is available, the research is available, and I can do what I need to do. I don't have to pick up the phone. I don't have to do that. Now, I don't know if it's 20%, 30%, 40%, but that's going to impact a lot of firms. Well, don't disagree.
Yeah, and it's hard to say exactly how it's going to impact. It's going to impact. Like, anybody who doesn't believe that needs to pull their head out of the sand or out of somewhere else that I won't say, and recognize there's going to be an impact. What that impact looks like, that's up for debate. But how I think that you mentioned AFAs a minute ago. I think that's going to be a much more prominent billing model than it is today. How will that impact the need, or will it? Maybe the answer is not at all, around client portal requirements and design. Like, is that going to increase the amount of information sharing or change the nature of information sharing that will need to exist?
I think I think so, because ultimately, I mean, AFAs could mean any number of different things. Ultimately, it means that it's not 6 minute increments and by the hour and everything else. But you still will want to track time, manage the project, do that sort of stuff. And I think AFAs and other such things, they just create an opportunity to, and it's not a fundamental it doesn't, the change doesn't have to happen, but I think the opportunity is to think of it more of a project environment, rather than, right, once a week I'm going to send an invoice and once a week I'm going to send an update. It's more of a collaboration thing. Okay, we're working together on this. You're the client, we're the people. I mean, it's the same as you guys delivering services to your clients. It's the same as us delivering services to our clients. you know we use monday.com to manage projects and deliver timelines and transparency around where we are, what we've done, what the scope of work is, all that sort of stuff. And I think that is, it's collaboration. It isn't sort of extranets. And I think that's where the opportunity comes in for firms, because ultimately the idea of an extranet, it's a point in time sort of data point. It's, I'm sharing something rather than we're working together. And I
Right.
think that is the shift change that maybe AFAs isn't the prompt for that, but that's the shift change that changes the dynamic of a client portal. I used to, it's a bad client portal is bad as a bad intranet. It's where information goes to die. Nobody looks at it. It's 5 months out of date before anyone realizes anything good's happened. That's just a bit shit. That
Yeah.
doesn't work anymore. People want to be able to go on my phone. I need to look at this. I need to look at that. Where are we? What are we doing? Because I'm on a tube. I'm on a train. I'm not at my desk. I'm whatever. And so they're those moments where naturally I do, and I'm not necessarily atypical, but when I've got 5 minutes outside of my desk job, I'll go, I've got 5 admin jobs I need to do. Okay, well, let me go check how much I've spent with these guys, or where the project is with that. That's the shift change. That's the opportunity. It's collaboration rather than just,
A snapshot.
yeah, 100%. And I think
Yeah.
that's the way that um, we often talked back in the old HiQ days, stealing sort of marketing. We used to say we were blurring the lines between intranet and extranet. We were bringing sort of the human-centered approach to, it's not just sharing a document, it's two humans working together, or a bunch of humans working together collaboratively to create the outcome. And the outcome might be a contract, it might be the end of a deal, it might be whatever. But that's the change that will happen, and that will drive, then client portals will be, they'll be sort of transient. There'll be movement, there'll be people updating things, like the old sort of, before Microsoft bought it and killed it, the old Yammer style. Oh, we're working on this, or naturally this has happened. Okay, serendipitously, I'm going to see. That's not even a word. It might be a word. There's a like you find stuff out just through a stream of consciousness that you're working on, and I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah, we're banking on that. In fact, if you were to ask me what Infodash does, and you weren't subject to the limitations of the legacy terminology, I would say unified collaboration. And it's interesting that HiQ wanted to talk about blurring the lines, because they have no intranet presence at all in the U.S. Like, I can count the number of firms on one hand that
Yeah,
I'm aware of that use it for intranet. We really are a viable intranet plat. We kind of came the other direction. They tried to go from extranet in. We're
yeah,
going from intranet out. And it really is unified collaboration. So I think the big benefit there, you touched on it, one of them, which is like real time updates, collaboration. I can send you a chat in Teams about a matter that I'm working on in a shared channel. And we're putting a lot of chips on that part of the table. We think that the way, like, so if I'm a Fortune 100 company and I've got 40 panel firms, which is not unusual at all, how do I get updates on my matters? Well, I got to go to 40 HiQ sites at a minimum. You may have one per matter at each firm, right? So you have separate URL, separate set of credentials, separate user interface because everybody customizes it differently. We think that creates too much friction. So we're doubling down on B2B sharing and the ability for law firms to share channels with their clients. And everybody's like, oh, law firms will never do that. Well, guess what? Latham and Watkins is doing it right now. They're the number 2 law firm in the world by revenue. So law firms are going to have to get comfortable with this. And there's a little bit of administrative overhead you have to, and a little bit of risk that you have to assume to enable B2B sharing. It's about a 13-step process that that IT has to do, where you have to accept. You basically look at the security posture of your client's tenant and assume and say, yes, we accept that for sharing channels. So it's a little clunky today, but it's getting better all the time.
13 steps doesn't sound lucky at all. It should just be 12 or 14, honestly. There's no 13 floors in hotels and stuff like that.
That's right. That's
Don't
right.
make it a 13-step process. Don't make it a 13-step process.
Exactly.
But I think you touched on it. You're right. The idea of unified collaboration. You're right. IQ didn't. It had some intranet clients, but it started at the extranet and then worked its way out. And I think sort of that's it. It could have gone further, but it didn't for a whole bunch of reasons. And I think the idea that the whole Teams thing, wrapping everything around Microsoft strategically makes sense. But I think that I bet, and I don't know this for a fact, but I bet sort of Latham, you say that they've exposed it to Teams channels, to externals and everything else. But there's probably, in terms of usage, it's probably certain practice areas doing certain types of law. And, a firm like Latham's covering, so I don't know, 50 sectors, I don't know how many clients, that the opportunity to do that and the adoption sort of spike is still probably down here somewhere. They're doing it, and they've broken ground, and that's great. But I think that's the dynamic, because ultimately most law firms, every team, every department, even teams within the same department, they operate slightly differently because of the way that the partner operates, or the way that this happens, or whatever it might be. And I think that's the challenge. I've talked at length with loads of people, and everyone talks about it, like the adoption of legal tech. Why is it so hard to adopt legal tech? What does it mean? Blah 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 blah. And it's hard because everyone starts thinking about, okay, well, we've sold HiQ, or we've sold Autologics, or we've sold Infodash, the extranet side, not the intranet side, because that is firm wide, to law firm ABC. Okay. And so you go, okay, well, team A is using it a lot. Team B's thinking about using it. Team C aren't interested. Their clients are too clever, special, whatever it might be, risk averse. We can't do that. And that's the big challenge. That's the opportunity again. Sort of it's when you start thinking about your processes as collaboration, actual real-time collaboration, working on things with your clients, their advisors, and yourself, and you bring that full circle. It's just getting work done. You're basically just doing work. You're not thinking about where they are and what rights they've got, because somebody in IT's covered that 13-step process. Really, that's the opportunity to then start to scale and really then add value around what that looks like.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I'm sure it's in the early stages and it's going to start slowly, but I think it's going to pick up momentum quickly because of the friction that it eliminates. And, Latham does a lot of work in the tech sector, and I would imagine they have, clients that have a very low tolerance for friction, right? As tech people, we're like this. Why do I have 40 sites to go log into to get detail about my matters? It's not efficient. But if you do enable B2B sharing and you leverage shared channels and teams now, and 93% of the Fortune 100 use Teams as their primary collaboration platform, so it's near ubiquitous. So I'm a client and you're my outside legal partner, and you upload a document to a shared channel that I'm subscribed to. I get a notification right in my Teams environment. I don't have to go log somewhere. I don't need an email. You send me a message, it gets coalesced with all of my. I can see your presence. Are you at your desk? Hey, I want to ping you real quick, Ben. I have a question about this labor and employment matter that you're advising us on. It just makes sense. So I think, yes, it's going to start slow, but it's going to ramp significantly once clients get a taste.
But I don't disagree. But I think there are natural points in time where you think about, okay, well, do we want to turn this on? Why do we want to do this? So naturally, that friction goes away for the client. But the friction for the lawyer is, oh shit, I got like 10 clients asking me questions right now, and they see that I'm green, so I've got to answer all of them really quickly, and it puts pressure on the individual. Whereas before, it's behind an email, it's behind a guarded system that the client does have.
Asynchronous.
Yeah, it has. And so you're sort of set there and you're going, well, I can reply to that email tomorrow. I can reply to that email then. That kind of real-time interaction comes with its own challenges too.
Yeah.
In terms of, not just in terms of the ability to sort of maintain client experience, client sort of KPIs, SLAs. I asked a question at 10 o'clock last night and you replied to me at 10 o'clock the day after. We've got a 24-hour turnaround on things. Oh, well, in the contract, it's only if you send a formal fax or an email or some other by pigeon. You know what I mean? These are the things that are that law firms are naturally going to think, oh God, how much are we putting on our lawyers? What does that look like? Because it is a fundamental change in working environment, because the floodgates can open. They might not, but they can. You know,
they can, and I think you're going to have to turn things on and off selectively, right? For a little, if Infodash is your client, you're going to have a different position than if Coca-Cola wants to engage with you through that mechanism.
I wouldn't put yourself so harshly, mate. Honestly, I think if Infodash, I mean, Coca-Cola can wait.
Exactly. Infodash is top dog. Well, and I think also that as these technologies get more mainstream, right? Teams is actually brand new in the big timeline of things. It's been around since 2016. Nobody really started using it until COVID. Let's be honest. And in legal, they're still not using it. They use it for chat, presence, and online meetings. Those are the three use cases. They don't use channels. They don't store documents there, any work product whatsoever. I think what is going to drive firms down the Teams path is that what clients are going to do is they're going to say, okay, you don't do shared channels? Good. Use our Teams tenant. We'll give you external access. You can start uploading your documents and pushing your information to us that way. That's what's going to happen, I think.
Yeah, that kind of dynamic already happens. I mean, whether it's Teams or anything else, but we've got a couple of clients who use Slack exclusively. So we sort of offered the idea that we would have a shared Teams. No, we don't want that. You can be invited into our Slack channel. You can do this. You can. So, we're in the same point. We're getting access to a Jira board. We're getting access to this. So, I mean, some clients are going to drive us in particular working processes that are quite hard to sort of push against. You're right. Teams is growing its usage, but it's chat, it's presence, it's online meetings. Mm-hmm. God, I hate that noise that Teams makes when it's calling you. It's like,
it's rough.
Like 19 million times a day. It feels like I go to sleep and that's what I hear. But that's that kind of client sort of led, not innovation, but client led change. It's like, what's driving those decisions? Why has the client chosen that? Why are they forcing us to do that? And I think the law firms that sort of take that approach of actually we can drive that change, we can retain more control if we lead with it, then that's going to be an issue. I think what's really interesting is you sort of, we talked about Latham being one of the leading firms that are doing this. You know, it's it was always much easier for the smaller firms to lead with that kind of approach because, you know,
Yes.
30 lawyers, 50 lawyers, maybe 100 across 3 different locations. No, that's quite easy. I say quite easy. It's change. Change is hard, but it's easier than driving change to a 2,000 lawyer shop across 5 different teams, 5 different jurisdictions. You know, that is challenging because they are, you know, different cultures, different working practices, different this, different that. So I think
Different rules.
exactly. So it's going to be interesting, but I think you bring it back to those touch points. It's like, okay, well, at the moment, we engage with our clients when we send them an invoice, when we speak to them on a Teams call, and when we maybe share some knowledge with them and we get instructed with some new matters, or whatever it might be. And we'll go, they're the touch points that sort of are classically, and there's a bunch more, but they're the touch points with your customer. Ultimately, what you want to do, you want to be increasing your touch points. You want to be making sure that you think, the biggest thing that we're drifting slightly, but law firms' opportunity to cross-sell their own services to their own clients is massive. Like you've got a tax team that's got 25 clients here, and some are cross-selling HR resources or immigration resources, and but most aren't. Most don't do that very well. And I think they're the kind of things that again, that kind of digital presence, that understanding of the types of things that the firm does and how they buy from different firms, that's going to be exposed through, that's going to be tech enabled. It's going to be products. It's going to be services. I think that's the way that as you say, the extranet world, to be honest with you, I think that the word extranet
needs to die. It
yeah,
needs to die.
it's the idea that how do I get stuff done with my clients in a frictionless way that means that we can work together, they can instruct me, I can deliver good outcomes, and you know, technology isn't in the way. Technology is enabling it to happen. I think that's going to be a big driver for um, that kind of that ideal of just thinking about it as collaboration, thinking about it as just doing work rather than
Yeah. I would love to take the terms intranet, extranet out back and shoot them in the head, but we and just
that's
talk
very
about
American of you. You know, that's the way it works. Guns and things.
but the market knows and understands what that is. So we have to, like, if you look at our site that by the time this airs will be um, in place, we lead with unified collaboration, but right there, intranet and extranet, because that's what people understand.
Yeah.
Over time, those things, the terms don't even make sense anymore. Intra means within, right? And back when we had a firewall and all of our on-prem infrastructure, intranet made sense, right? Now we have very little on-prem infrastructure. Everything's in the cloud. Extra, meaning outside of our environment, it's everything is extranet because it's in the cloud, right? So the terms don't make sense. They need to die, but you know, things die a slow death sometimes. So
Maybe that should be a panel at ILTA or something like that. Words that we wish we could shoot in the head.
led by an American,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Well, hey, this has been an awesome conversation. We had a whole bunch of stuff that we were going to talk about, but I think we talked about the stuff that's most important. And maybe down the road, I think we literally got through half of our agenda. We can cover the other half.
I'd love to. You know, yeah, I sort of, this has been a nice way to end my day because I've got no meetings after this.
Nice.
I have to go and spend time with my kids. You know, I don't really want to do that. I might pretend that I'm on this for a bit longer. But you know, but these are the kind of conversations, just shooting the breeze. it's been a fascinating 15 years since when I think for 3 years before I left CMS and joined HiQ, we were talking about Extranets deal rooms. What was going on? How would we provision it? We did look at SharePoint as building it ourselves, and it was like bonkers. We had a company called Project Fusion running all of our deal rooms and data rooms. HiQ came along. You know, those are the kind of things. The journey is sort of, it feels like that 15 years have gone slow, but I mean, you're bald and I'm gray, so something's happened in terms of the time. But you know, I think we're at that age where, not age personally, but law firms, innovation is another one of those words that I wish we could shoot, but tech-enabled solutions, tech-enabled sort of services, it means so many things and creates so much opportunity now to deliver services in a better, more coherent way. And, you know, that's why we're still in business, both of us. We're doing slightly different things, taking that sort of, but we're taking the idea of it's tech-enabled, we're going to deliver better outcomes. How do we do it better? How do we do it smarter? And I think that, yeah, it's all good. And I'm really excited to see the product land at the end of this month. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it is awesome. We've already got 3 customers in beta that we've been working with, one for quite a while now. Cool. And it's going really well. Yeah, I really see this as, again, I don't like the term, but it's what people know. This is really kind of Extranet 3.0. You know, you had 1.0, which was all of the players and internally built solutions that during the early 2000s that existed. Then kind of HiQ came along, really kind of dominated the marketplace. Not much has changed there from where we sit, and especially since the acquisition. TR seems to be very focused on AI, understandably so.
Isn't everyone, Ted? Isn't everyone?
Yeah.
Everyone should be, because it's the thing.
It is the thing, but there's also other things that have to require focus. So yeah, we really think that this 3.0 era of extranets is going to be interesting, and we're going to be the first one in the legal space to really do it. So, before we wrap up, how do people find out more about what you do in Autologics?
You can find me in all of the usual places, and you can find us in all the usual places: LinkedIn, website. We're at most of the events that most people go to. So this year we're going to Legal Tech Talk in June, ILTA in August, somewhere in September that I can't remember, Cayman in October.
Legal Geek.
Oh, Legal Geek in October. So 2 events in October. Oh my God.
TLTF maybe.
I will hopefully be at TLTF as well in November. So yeah, I'm around. But if you want somebody sensible to talk to, don't reach out to me.
You're such a salesman. All right, well, good stuff. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you taking a few minutes, and enjoy faking like this podcast is lasting longer, so you can have some more alone time.
I'm gonna have some alone time. It's gonna be
good stuff. Thank you, Ben. All right, take care.
Take it easy. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content.